Welcome to VLearn, Virtual Learning Network. This is session number 33 of the subject India, Earliest Times to the 8th Century AD, and the chapter is Economy, Society and Polity, Guptas. Topics to be covered are Introduction, Administration under the Guptas, Economy and Society. Introduction. There are a variety of sources which tell us about economic, social, administrative and cultural aspects of this period. These sources of information are inscription written on different materials like copper, plate, stone, clay seals, coins issued by rulers of different dynasties, material from excavations, contemporary literature, and accounts left by foreign travelers like Fa Hein. So there are various sources which give us information or which tell us about the economic conditions, the social conditions, as well as the administrative and cultural aspects of that period. And these are inscription on different materials, coins issued by rulers, material from excavations, contemporary literature, and accounts left by foreign travelers. Administration under the Guptas. King. The king remained the central figure of administration. However, there was a considerable change in the character of monarchy, but the king was the central and the most important figure of administration and rule. We find that the Gupta monarchs adopted high-sounding titles like Brahma Bhattarka, Brahma Devata, Chakravarti, Parmeshwar, etc. For example, the Allahabad Prasati of Samudragupta describes him as equal to the gods Dhanada, Kubera, Varun, sea god, Indra and Antaka, Vama, who had no antagonist of equal power in the world. So, we find the Gupta monarchs adopting high-sounding titles. So, the Gupta monarchs, the Gupta kings have had high-sounding titles, and these examples were the Allahabad Prasati and the other examples which considered themselves, the kings considered themselves as sea god or equal to gods, and there was no other power which could compete with them. Council of Ministers and other officials. The Gupta inscriptions are not very clear about the hierarchy of ministers. However, there is no doubt that the king issued to take counsel of his ministers and issue written instructions to officials on all important matters. So there is no doubt about the king that the king used to take counsel of his ministers, take advice of his ministers, and also issue written instructions to officials on all important matters. The minister's office was perhaps hereditary. So it was hereditary, and the person from the family would take over the office as and when the predecessor is not there. For example, the Udayagiri inscription of the time of Chandragupta II informs us that Virasena Sabha, the Minister for War and Peace, was holding this office by inheritance. Army. The Guptas must have had a big army organization. At the time of war, the king led his army, but ordinarily there was a minister called Sandhi Vrahika who was helped by a group of high officials. The official title Mahabadalikrita occurs in many inscriptions. So the Guptas must have had a very big army organization, and officials like Pilupati, Aswapati, Narapati, head of foot soldiers, possibly worked under him. So officials like these worked under the particular army head. The army was paid in cash and its needs were well looked after by an official in charge of stores called Rana Bhanda Garika. So the army was also paid in cash and their needs were also taken care of. Revenue administration. Land revenue was the main source of the state's income besides the fines. So in Samudragupta's time, we hear of an officer Gopas Ramin working as Aksha Patala Dhikrita. So land revenue, that was the main source of the state's income. State's income came from land revenue which people gave it to the state, and also besides the fines. His duty, the officer's duty was to enter numerous matters in the accounts registers, recover royal dues from the sureties of servants, to check embezzlement and recover fines for loss due to neglect or fraud. So there was an officer who used to look after every account and every accounts registers to maintain and to enter numerous matters there, to recover royal dues from the sureties of servants, and to also check fraud or any other kinds of loss or embezzlement. Another prominent high official was Pustapala. It was his duty to make inquiries before recording any transaction. So it was his duty to make inquiries or to inform people before recording or before taking any transaction from the person. So there were two people in charge of looking into the revenue, how the revenue came, and the proper entries were made in the register, and to also check fraud, embezzlement, or any other loss, and to recover fines, etc. Provinces, districts, and villages. The whole empire was divided into desas or rashtras or bhuktis. The inscriptions provide us with the names of certain bhuktis. In Bengal, we hear of Pundravardhara Bhukti, which corresponded to North Bengal. Tira Bhukti corresponded to North Bihar. The bhuktis were governed by uparikas directly appointed by the king. In areas like Western Malwa, we find local rulers like Bandhu Varman ruling as subordinate to Kumaragupta first, but Parnadana was appointed governor in Saurashtra by Skanda Gupta. Economy. As we read, agricultural crops constituted the main resources which the society produced, and that the major part of the revenue of the state also came from agriculture. So the major part of the revenue of the state came from agriculture, as the agricultural crops constituted the main resources, and from there came the state revenue, as the agriculture was flourishing during that point of time. This, of course, does not mean that agriculture was the only occupation of the people, or that people lived only in villages. There were other occupations like commerce and production of crafts, which had become specialized occupations, and in which different social groups were involved and they were also engaged. So it does not mean that only agriculture was the mainstay of the population. There were other occupations also like commerce and production of crafts, handicrafts, which had also grown during that time, and there were specialized groups who knew how to make it, and they were involved or engaged in that activities. Agriculture. Let us begin with the pattern of agricultural production. The concern of the society with agricultural production is clear from the way various aspects associated with agricultural operations are mentioned in the sources of the Gupta period. Various types of land are mentioned in the inscriptions. Land under cultivation was usually called kshetra. Lands not under cultivation were variously called as khila, a prahat, etc., and inscriptions give the impression that uncultivated land was being regularly brought under cultivation. So the land which was not cultivated, or which was uncultivated, that was regularly brought under cultivation, under farming. And various types of land are also mentioned in the inscriptions, and land under cultivation was usually called kshetra. Crafts production and trade. Crafts production covered a very wide range of items. So a lot of items were covered under crafts production. There were items of ordinary domestic use like earthen pots, items of furniture, baskets, metal tools for domestic use, and so on. Simultaneously, a wide variety of luxury items including jewelry made of gold, silver, and precious stones, objects made of ivory, fine clothes of cotton and silk, and other costly items had to be made available to the affluent sections of people. So the crafts production also involved a wide range. Various social groups were involved in producing the crafts. There were luxury items like jewelry. There were also fine clothes of cotton and silk, and there were items of ordinary domestic use like earthen pots, furniture, baskets, etc. And these were made available for the rich or the affluent class of society. Some of these items were made available through trade, others were manufactured locally. Society. You've already read that according to the scheme of society conceived by the Brahmins, society was divided into 4 varnas, with each varna performing the set of functions prescribed for it and enjoying whatever rights were given to it. This was the ideal social order, and that the state was expected to preserve it. So the society was divided into 4 varnas. First was the Brahmins, second was the Kshatriyas, and third was the Vaishyas, and fourth was the Shudras. So the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, they were considered the most upper class, and the Vaishyas, they were given the work for agriculture and the animal domestication, and the last one was the Shudras, which was the lowest caste. And this means that even when a small state emerged in some corner of the country, the king of that state was expected to recognize this as the ideal social order. So this was considered as the ideal social order, and the state was expected to preserve it. So that was all about the society, state, and the agriculture which flourished during that point of time, and how people made different crafts, the production of crafts, and also the Varna system, how the society was divided into the four Varnas, and the state was expected to preserve those Varnas. So these are some of the questions you'll be doing yourself. Question number 1: discuss in about 5 lines the sources which refer to crafts and craftsmen, and discuss. Question number 2: discuss the changes in the Varna system in about 10 lines. That's all. Thank you. Happy learning. We learning.